Hi all, time for another devlog. I've been hard at work developing new features for the game, but this time we're doing something a little different. We're actually paring down and removing some features of the game. One of the big struggles as a game developer is balancing your ambition with what you can actually complete. And the more stuff that you have in your game, the higher the chance that your game loses its focus and becomes spread too thin. Jack of all trades, but master of none. But sometimes over the course of development, ideas that you thought were interesting and good on paper also don't pan out as you expect. So today's devlog is a little different in the sense that I'm not talking about what we've added lately, but what we've removed. One of the core concepts of Alien Frontier was the idea that you had the ability to place mining rigs anytime during a run. You'd have to scan the environment and choose where to place your rigs, which encourages environmental interaction and scanning. I still love that aspect of the game, but after a lot of playtesting, many players felt directionless and weren't sure where they were supposed to be placing their mining rigs. We realized that the average run in a game should be more focused, and as such, we changed the system so that there was only one specific spot where you can build your mining rig, as opposed to the more free-form system as before. Players are still encouraged to observe the world, but now the game's objectives feel much more directed and focused. There's a visual indicator for where you need to interact with it, but it's still hard to see unless you're in the right direction and close enough. These will now also appear on the scan indicator, providing the player a general direction to head towards should they get lost. This is really similar to Risk of Rain's teleporters, where players have a clearer idea of what exactly they need to do, compared to my demo where I received a lot of comments and feedback regarding how players felt aimless and lost. A lot of times they were just out in the open world, kind of walking around not knowing what to do. So focus is really important. Next up are some smaller combat changes. Initially, your character's special skill was on a cooldown that replenished as you killed more enemies. However, that ended up feeling far too restricted and resulted in players only getting a few chances to use their skills per run. I've instead converted it to a more traditional timed cooldown system, which encourages more common usage of your skills. Additionally, you would earn currency in-game by killing enemies and running up to them and collecting their clots. These clots only exist in a level for a few seconds before disappearing, forcing players to move up to them quickly. The intended experience of this was to encourage players to play up close and aggressive, but this feature wasn't overly well received, and additionally I realized that my game's bullet hell combat works better at mid and long range. Forcing players to always get up close and personal just puts them in positions that are too chaotic for the game's combat system and doesn't show it in the best light. Instead, I've changed it so players will automatically earn clots at any distance instead of having to rush enemies and get the rewards. On top of that, I've increased the density of items in the world, adding more enemy outposts and more importantly, more chests. This means that players get even more goodies per run, which in my opinion is always a super satisfying element of roguelikes, so why not add more things for the players to find? Furthermore, the previous economy was a little convoluted. You would collect the aforementioned clots to unlock special upgrade chests that dropped when you created an outpost. And previously you'd find one or two free chests that cost nothing to open. The problem is that it became really unclear what clots were for, and players were questioning why they should bother risking fights against enemies. To further simplify the reward loop, I've made it so most chests require clots to unlock or keys to unlock. That means players have a much more legible loop of fighting enemies, collecting currency, and then using that currency to open chests. Now there's no more vagueness about which chests cost currency and which ones don't. It's just very simple. Kill enemies to get more gear so you can kill harder enemies. So you might be thinking that the end result of these changes has reduced the complexity in the game, and yes, I think it's made it less complicated, but not less deep, which is really important. The focus of the game now is a lot more precise and easy to read. Before, the game felt a little too open and, more importantly, loose. But now the core gameplay loop is a lot more clear to understand. You have your objectives that you have to go to, you have enemies to collect currency, and you use that currency to get upgrades. And on top of that, reducing some of the complexity also helps reduce the workload by removing some of the more complicated systems, especially the freeform building system, which provided a lot of headaches, as you can imagine. So ultimately, I think we fell a little bit into the common indie developer trap, wanting to make a big sprawling game that is open world and has building and exploration and combat. And those games are really good, but it's very easy for a big sprawling game to feel unfocused. I mean, when you think of the best video games, they can often be distilled into a core essence. It's the gameplay loop, or it's essentially the idea of it, concentrated. Some games are about exploring and gaining new ways to explore the environment. Other games are about challenging your own personal bests, or others are simply about completing a linear story. But what makes the best games good is that laser sharp focus on what exactly they want to accomplish. And it's very easy to have your blue sky ideas and think of your dream game that often kind of loses that focus. So what we did here was a really necessary part of game development, which is reevaluating everything and kind of trimming the fat around the edges.
Snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap.
And the end result is a demo and game that is a lot more focused and just seems a lot more confident in itself. And I'm really confident in it now. I've never felt better about the demo, and I'm so confident that I've actually updated the demo on Steam, so you guys can go and check it out and give it a try. There's a lot of feedback forms within it, so if you've played the demo before, feel free to check it out again and see how the changes have reflected in the game. I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts. So that's all for now. Thank you once again for giving a listen, and if you enjoyed this, feel free to subscribe, but even better yet, please wishlist the game on Steam. That is one of the most impactful ways to help out an indie dev, and it's greatly appreciated. Every wishlist counts. All right, I'll talk to you guys next time.